Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. So, hi everyone. My name's Lynn Mason. I'm the business manager for the West of Berkshire Safeguarding Adults Board, and I'm here today just to say welcome and to introduce Rebecca Berry for this final webinar of Safeguarding Adults Week. Hope you've enjoyed the week. Any feedback you've got in regards to the week, good, bad, or indifferent, really appreciate it. It really helps us with our planning moving forward. I can't take any of the credit for it. My colleague Marcia Campbell was the brains behind the week with a very engaged task and finish group. So just Marcia's not here, she's actually got the afternoon off, but I just wanted to extend my thanks on the video to Marcia and the task and finish group, and to all of our presenters for the week. It's been a great success. I think we've probably hit more attendees for webinars than we have in previous years, which is great. Just to say, we are recording this webinar, and all being well, it will be put onto our website so people can access that. So if you find the webinar interesting and your colleagues are not here, please do feel free to share. So you're here today, and Rebecca Berry, head of, why has everyone got such long job titles? Head of Safeguarding and Quality Assurance at Adult Social Care for Wokingham Borough Council. So Wokingham Borough Council are one of our partners within the Safeguarding Adults Board. And Rebecca's going to talk to us about transitional safeguarding and EMRAC. So EMRAC stands for, and I did have to Google this morning because I'm familiar with the term, but not necessarily what it stands for, Exploitation and Missing Risk Assessment Conference. So Rebecca's going to give a high level summary of what that looks like in general and also in Wokingham. So it may not be necessarily 100% relevant to your organisations that you work for, but it will be useful and may help sort of inform future practice within your areas. So yeah, please take note. Before Rebecca starts, I am going to ask the poll. So it's just one of the polls that is going to pop out in a second, just about people's confidence level in this subject. And what that does, I'm going to ask you exactly the same question at the end of the session, and what that does, it helps us sort of understand sort of how the session has hit. We've been asking all this question for the whole of the week, so if you could please answer the poll, either come up on the screen or within the chat, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. We'll stop recording so you can put your camera on and have a chat with us, or if there are any questions that you want to ask straight away, or not straight away, but while you think of them, please put them in the chat, or in the Q&A function section, and we will get to them at the end of the session. So I think that's I've covered everything. Yeah, and I will pass you over to Rebecca. So welcome, Rebecca.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everybody making time on a Friday afternoon to come along. Nice to see a few familiar names. Lynn will be looking in the chat because otherwise my trying to multitask will make the wheels fall off. So I appreciate your support in that, Lynn. So as Lynn said, I just wanted to sort of give a general overview of what do we mean by transitional safeguarding, and how the use of EMRAC meetings are one of the ways that Wokingham are seeking to move into that, or have moved into that space. So that's what we'll be going through today. And I look forward, I've left enough time at the end to hopefully allow us to have some discussion as well. So we're going to have some awareness of exploitation. What do we mean when we're talking about exploitation? Transitional and contextual safeguarding, the statutory framework that from an adult's perspective, and have clarity of the role and purpose and function that we in Wokingham are using EMRAC for adults. And spoiler alert, making you aware that that includes an expansion to include 18 to 25-year-olds. So what do we mean by exploitation? Particularly when we're thinking about transitional safeguarding, one of the areas we might be talking about is criminal exploitation, organised crime, including county lines, criminal networks involved in exporting illegal drugs into one or more area within the UK, dedicated use of mobile phone lines or deal lines. That's actually where the name county lines came from. I didn't know that initially. The county line is the telephone number, effectively, which is given to the person who is running that drug business, which has numbers of customers or those they seek to sell to. So these sorts of organisations are likely to exploit children and vulnerable adults to move and store the drugs and money. They're seeking for the high risk activities such as transporting, selling drugs to be done by those that potentially are expendable to them and their organisation. They'll often use coercion, intimidation, violence, including sexual violence and weapons. But initially, it may be characterised by a form of grooming, becoming part of a family of individuals that have money, power, status within the community online. We know that there's lots of stuff on TikTok which is glamorizing the selling of drugs and gangs, which means that people can be pulled in through social media as well. So one of the forms we're talking about is criminal exploitation. There is also what's known as CSE, so child sexual exploitation, but that we know that that's not confined to just children. That it is people of any age, but particularly younger people as well, up to 25. Similar to criminal exploitation, a child or young person is coerced, they're manipulated or deceived into sexual activity. And sometimes the criminal exploitation, the drugs and the child sexual exploitation or young person and sexual exploitation overlap, that one may seek to get the young people involved in drugs, which then allows them to sexually exploit them as well. They're often tricked into believing that it's a loving relationship, and then tricked into sexual activity by those people, which are then used to further the exploitation. What we're seeing quite a lot of in EMRAC is images, people being groomed by one particular individual who that person thinks they're in a consensual, loving relationship with, and then those images are used across a network, and then that widens the sexual exploitation for that person in person, and both in person and online. And that's where we see the use of technology. Cuckooing has always, well, not always, but for quite a long time, been part of what we think of in adult safeguarding, because often those that are being cuckooed can often have care and support needs, can often be people that adult social care would be working with. So those that are involved in criminal exploitation and sexual exploitation may be using the premises of somebody who has some vulnerabilities as a place to conduct those activities. But it can work both ways as well, in that the young person who is being exploited is then being encouraged to exploit somebody else for their property. So you can end up with multiple victims. And historically, I think there's been a pigeonholing, if you like, of the person who is doing the cuckooing is the perpetrator or the bad person, the bad guy, and the person being cuckooed is the victim. Whereas actually, what we're understanding more now is that all are that are involved in this, that are being exploited by the sort of higher echelons of the organised crime or the child exploitation organisations. So this is where we might find that we are experiencing or noticing cuckooing. Another indication that exploitation is present in the experience of children or young people is episodes of missing, which is why, and we'll talk about it in a moment, why when we're thinking about EMRAC, we're thinking about exploitation, missing, risk assessment conference. So it sounds obvious, but a missing person is anyone whose whereabouts can't be established and the context suggests they may be a victim of crime. Or a person is at risk of harm to themselves or another, or where there's a particular concern because the circumstances are out of character. So anyone can be a missing person. It's not, this isn't a sort of national definition, but it's just a useful way of thinking about when we're thinking about an adult who's going missing, what we might mean. When we're thinking about it in terms of adult safeguarding, when we're thinking about is because being missing in itself isn't a safeguarding concern. When missing may become an adult safeguarding concern is in these areas. So are they escaping abuse or neglect at home or the community or a care setting? Are they running away from exploitation or abuse? Are they missing from where they usually live because they're going towards it? So some of the scenarios I've already spoken about, towards grooming, or were they able to go missing, and another area of it, were they able to go missing as a result of neglect, in that somebody should have been having care or oversight of them, but didn't. So that's where there's a correlation between people that go missing and potential exploitation that can be an indicator. So I'm going to play this video now to get a bit of an understanding around contextual safeguarding. It does focus on children, but it is children and young people. So those that we would also be looking at under adult safeguarding. Lynn, I'm going to get you to just make sure that you can hear the sound, just to make sure everybody else can hear the sound. That's all right.
Contextual safeguarding is an approach to safeguarding children and young people that recognizes and responds to their experiences of significant harm beyond the boundaries of their home. Contextual safeguarding approaches require practitioners to identify and respond to risks and vulnerabilities facing young people in a range of social environments. In other words, a contextual approach to safeguarding identifies and responds to more than individual risk factors and vulnerabilities. Child protection and safeguarding structures already routinely identify and respond to violence and abuse experienced by young people within their family or home settings. However, these structures are yet to consistently engage with other social environments where young people spend their time. As young people enter adolescence, they spend increasing amounts of time outside of the home and may experience violence and abuse within these public environments. We know that a young person's peer group can be more influential than their family when it comes to setting standards of what is normal, and we know that peer-on-peer abuse can affect any young person. While schools can be a protective factor for many young people, research has also documented young people's experience of sexual harassment and other forms of peer-on-peer abuse in educational settings. Schools have also been sites of peer recruitment into abusive and sometimes organized networks of exploitation. We know that young people experience violence and abuse in public spaces. Exposure to violence on the streets has been routinely linked to a young person's involvement in street gangs, and young people have been sexually exploited in parks, transport hubs, shopping centers, and other public spaces. Contextual safeguarding calls for a safeguarding system that assesses risk and intervenes to protect young people beyond the boundaries of their home. For more information and resources, please visit the website of the Contextual Safeguarding Network.
here we are. And although that video has an American accent, that is a UK website. So there's lots of really interesting things on there. So contextual safeguarding is understanding that sometimes historically assessments are done on people. Assessments are done on people. So if you're thinking about child protection, it's about that child and how their family are keeping them safe. And it may be parenting assessments. For an adult, you may be thinking about, are their care needs being met at home? Who is their carer? What support do they need? Contextual safeguarding is recognizing that there is potential harm outside of people's homes, and that comes both online and physically. There is a move as part of our EMRAC, which I'll talk about in a minute, but there's a move to, certainly in children's, for there to be people to be able to make a referral in about a place. So you wouldn't have a person to do this, the safeguarding inquiry about, or the assessment about. And certainly in the adult space, the Community Safety Partnership, and we have an exploitation lead who is looking at how to gather that information and get an understanding about where in the areas we work are people at risk, are children and young people more at risk, and understand what we can do to reduce that risk and manage it. So transitional safeguarding, many of you may have seen the Bridging the Gap knowledge briefing. And what that found, and it looked at some work that was being done in Northumberland, what it found was that there is often a cliff edge at 18, that children's services would be involved with young people up to the age of 18 where there are concerns about exploitation, abuse, etc. But that at 18, those that don't have potentially the traditional care and support needs, such as a learning disability or a physical need, that risk would still exist, but that the two frameworks, the two legal frameworks that children's services and adult services are operating in, would not naturally dovetail into each other. And so they picked up that these were the sort of areas that may be needed in order to bridge the gap between those two legal frameworks. So the idea for transitional safeguarding is it allows adolescents and young adults to fluidly, across developmental stages, preparing young people for their adult lives. It's not, and this is difficult sometimes, it's not, we in professions, we often like a set of rules, or, we are naturally, in local authority, we are statutory bodies. We are defined by our legal frameworks. Transitional safeguarding isn't necessarily going to be a prescribed model. It's not set out in law. It's a joined up approach to policy and practice that's applied to local circumstances. So it's not about transition planning. It's not about passing on somebody's support needs. It's a system-wide issue as well. It's not about children's services to adult social care. As I just alluded to, there's work in the community safety partnership spaces that would be relevant for that. After this meeting, I'm going to be talking about the youth offer across Wokingham, which extends from childhood up to 25, and that's about the youth spaces, the open spaces, the clubs, all of those sorts of things. That all feeds into transitional safeguarding work for people to have healthy and safe spaces for their leisure. So I think this is quite a key sentence. Some young adults may require help to be safe and healthy, even if they don't have formally defined care and support needs. So the current the impact of the current system is that there's a significant human and economic cost, and we'll go on to a couple of case studies in a minute. It's a verb, not a noun. So is this a safeguarding versus how are we safeguarding somebody? And so it's a journey, and there are different pieces to it. There's how adult social care is responding, how children's services, how antisocial behaviour, how police. It's about partners working together to look at across the system how we work with those that may need or may be more vulnerable as they move past 18. So Charlie, as an example, Charlie was born in withdrawal from heroin in prison. He was exposed to domestic abuse in his early childhood and was adopted at age 2. In his teens, Charlie started to use drugs, and there were concerns that he was being used to run drugs and steal by other young people who were older than him. And he was involved in multiple services. He was living outside the family home by the time he reached 18. He was closed to children's services and referred to adult social care. He didn't engage with adult social care, and therefore he was closed. As we know, Section 11 of the Care Act allows people to say, no, thank you. I don't want to have an assessment from you. But they're an adult, they're over 18. No, thank you. I don't want an assessment from you. And the two situations when that ability to refuse an assessment is removed is one where somebody lacks mental capacity and it would be in their best interest to do so, and the other being where there is a concern that somebody is experiencing abuse or neglect, which feeds into our transitional safeguarding thoughts. Charlie continued to be exploited by people in the local area, both criminally and with sexual humiliation. His drug addiction impacted every aspect of his life. Whenever he was housed, people moved in with him. He broke his tenancy rules and was evicted, and he became street homeless. So by this point, we can recognise that potentially Charlie is experiencing abuse or neglect, and there may be something to indicate an appearance of care and support needs. Sadie lived at home with her parents. She was sexually abused by a family member. Oh, sorry, I've mixed up the names there. Was groomed and sexually abused over a long period by local group of men in her teens. Just to be clear, Amy and Sadie are both not real names. I've just mixed up the slides. Sadie has periods of going missing. She's open to children's services. She's referred to adult social care, who decline the referral as she has no appearance of care and support needs. At 18, she is closed to children's services. And so the question that we can talk about afterwards is the relevance of prevention. So if we think about whether somebody has care and support needs and what the relevance of prevention is for Charlie, and we can talk about this at the end, for Charlie and for Sadie, without support that may not necessarily be from adult social care, but without support from the whole system, is it likely that Sadie and Charlie may go on to develop care and support needs as they move into adulthood? Adverse childhood experiences come in many forms. These are just some of them that can make people more vulnerable to exploitation, but also more likely that exploitation will have a long and lasting impact upon their ability to manage their daily lives, look after themselves, access life as we would wish them to do. And these can all be factors as well. You know, we more and more are understanding how complex all of these different areas, all this neurodiversity, and how that can impact when people are transitioning from childhood into adulthood. And they're bringing those adverse childhood experiences with them, and often how neurodiversity presents itself. One of the challenges that schools are finding is that often neurodiversity and trauma can show themselves in similar ways. So the challenges that the system has is around working out what that person needs, because those behaviours are showing up in similar ways, and will continue to do so past 18. So thinking about adult social care, what does that mean for us as a statutory body? The area that we can use, and this is about services finding ways to use their duties and powers to support this transitional safeguarding piece. The Care Act guidance emphasises the importance of preventing or delaying the development of needs for care and support, and the importance of reducing needs that already exist. So that principle can be applied to those young people whose experiences with trauma mean that they may need support to live safely without them having formally defined care and support needs. Obviously, the well-being principle applies to everyone, though whether eligible for support or not. And the Care Act guidance also asks adult social care to ensure that decisions take account of individuals' circumstances, rather than basing decisions only on their age or appearance, any condition they have, or aspects of their behaviour. So this is important in ensuring that needs and vulnerabilities are recognised amongst young people who may be assumed to be ineligible for support. So thinking about that neurodiversity, drug and alcohol, adverse childhood experiences may not show up in a way that we expect. So linking it to safeguarding, Section 14.44 of the Statutory Care and Support Guidance, one of my favourites, is our power to undertake inquiries. So I'm sure, as at the end of Adult Safeguarding Week, I'm sure that you have heard a lot this week about what our statutory duties to undertake Section 42 inquiries are, which is that someone with an appearance of care and support needs is experiencing a risk of abuse or neglect, and as a result of those care and support needs is unable to protect themselves. Section 1444 says that local authorities can choose to undertake safeguarding inquiries for those where there's not a duty under Section 42, if we believe it's proportionate to do so and will enable the local authority to promote the person's well-being and support a preventative agenda. Now, what transitional safeguarding is not doing is suggesting that every young person who has experienced abuse or neglect should be moving into the transitional safeguarding piece. It's about that prevention of care and support needs. So we still have the idea of care and support needs running through. It's not transitional safeguarding isn't about universality, because there are lots of young people who struggle. And so it's about a proportion, it would be proportionate to do so, and working with those young people in order to prevent care and support needs, and to seek to stop the experience of abuse and neglect. So these are some of, this is a diagram just to sort of show where those young people may be coming through from. So maybe care experienced young people, those experiencing harm outside the home or involved in youth justice, or young people with learning disability, special educational needs, or mental health needs. Just some, and that, you know, that is not what's the word? That's not covering all that may be included. So again, that's, if you, the website address at the bottom there is the same one that was on the video. There's loads of things in there, but the the key principles that Holmes identified in 2018 was that it should be evidence informed, equality, diversity and inclusion informed, and participative. So there's the transitional part from having a developmental perspective, person-centered, relationships as vehicles for intervention, trauma-informed, and building, capacity building. And that's, you know, with anything that doesn't have a set of rules, there are challenges. The challenges have been about restrictive Care Act eligibility, potentially screaming out, focus on needs for care and support, preparing for adulthood post 18. We know that young people's brains continue to develop up to the age of 25. There's a lot of preparing for adulthood that happens post 18. Leaving care status, language jargon, risk adversity versus risk enablement. As I've already mentioned, vulnerability and abuse don't cease at 18. So things that can help us work in a more collaborative way is being mindful of the 6 principles of safeguarding, making safeguarding personal, co-production. What do our children and young people tell us that they need, that they want in this area? Understanding roles, team structures, communicating pathways, finding out the what next. So it may be that that a safeguarding inquiry is undertaken under 14.44 because we are concerned that there's a young person who appears to have some vulnerabilities and is at risk of or experiencing exploitation. Sometimes that safeguarding intervention is about being the coordinator. So adult social care, being involved as the coordinator, getting all the people that are involved in that young person's life or could be involved in that person's life with them and working out what is available. And sometimes it will be working out that there's a gap, and that's about our systems changing. What do we have? What resources do we have? What opportunities do we have to meaningfully work with young people in a way that's different to how we might work with our adult population with care and support needs usually? So I wanted to give you an example of Jada. When she was 17, police discovered her living in a shed in the garden of her parents' house. She had a neglected appearance and was underweight. She told police that she was made to go out to work for no money, complete all the domestic tasks in the house and look after all the multiple animals. And when I say multiple animals, having been there, I would say 12, 15 dogs, a lot of animals to look after. She was supported when the police found her, she was supported to go and stay with her paternal grandparents, but she couldn't stay for long due to the tenancy because they were living in supported living for people over the age of 60. She turned 18 and Children's Services closed their involvement and referred to adult social care. At that time, she had no diagnosis of a learning disability, but she didn't know how to use money, transport. She had very limited reading and an understanding of self-care. She didn't know how often you did your teeth. She didn't know about feminine hygiene. She didn't know about how often you would put deodorant on, for example. So using the 14.44, because she was still at risk of abuse because her mother was still trying to exploit her around money. But although she had care and support needs, at that point, there was no understanding of where those care and support needs were from. She didn't have a diagnosis of a learning disability. She hadn't been known to CAMS or mental health services as a child. She'd been unknown to services since she was 17. So Adult Social Care undertook a safeguarding inquiry, and to do that, that was, considering the risks to her of both within her family and with the wider community, and a Section 9 assessment, a care needs assessment, was undertaken. The inquiry found that there had been years of abuse, attempts to continue the coercion and control and financial abuse from her family and others in the community. There was police involvement and a safeguarding plan put in place to manage that. There was innovative practice that went on. This particular social worker that was working with Jada and identified what her needs were in the assessment of her needs, but wasn't able to at that time to attribute where they may have come from. So working closely with occupational therapy, I see we've got a couple on the line, they put together a skills gain program, similar sort of skills gain program that you might do for somebody with a learning disability. But it was sort of noted, it was recognizing the areas that Jada was struggling with, and very clearly mapping out on a timeline how to support her to move towards independence. So they had a skills gain program in place, and she was living in a supported living environment. That being said, another element, transitional safeguarding isn't about pulling people into lifelong dependence. An element is that young person may be struggling with those areas now because of what's happened to them. And what was found very quickly was that Jada was picking up these skills very quickly and was learning. She had not been given the opportunity to learn or been exposed to being able to manage her own finances, understand personal care. So it's about empowering young people to be able to move to independence. Just, child or adult in the centre, we're all part of all these concentric rings, and the risk can come from any of those areas. So one of the ways in Wokingham that we're looking at understanding how we can support young people is that across Berkshire there are various forums like EMRAC that share information about under 18s in order to coordinate a response. And a lot of this work has come out of the findings of Rotherham and other reviews. And what we wanted to do in Wokingham was to extend that to 25, to include people who between 18 and 25 that are experiencing or at risk of exploitation, whether it be from criminal or sexual exploitation. So the aim of that is to ensure that the information is used to protect them, to be able to highlight a coordinated response, because what may happen, and often does at EMRAC, is that a child who is experiencing criminal exploitation, we may be discussing elements of that child, and then the next person to be discussed is a young adult, and by linking that information we can find out that actually that they have a shared perpetrator, that the perpetrator is the same, that there are links, and so that allows that interference, that work across the partnership to stop the abuse, find out the links. So individual cases where sexual or criminal exploitation is suspected, there's that oversight, that problem solving of lots of partners getting together to talk about the case and to problem solve. They're considered by a single group, which allows us to have that link. There are also areas of the agenda where local intelligence is shared about, for example, particular places where concerns are happening in the community, and it supports the development of good practice. It is a secure and confidential environment to learn from previous practice and share information. And this is the key members of EMRAC. So in Wokingham, I joint chair with one of the heads of service from Children's Services and police. So the police from the exploitation unit, from the harm reduction unit. And then participants, representatives from all of these other agencies attend. And the idea is that they don't just attend to talk about what they know about that person from their own perspective. It's about a group of professionals working across Wokingham, sharing their knowledge and insight on cases, on people, even if they don't have any involvement with that young person or that child. When this is obviously from adapted from Children's, when we're thinking about whether somebody is referred into EMRAC or whether they're discussed at EMRAC, these are different areas where we may be using to consider the risk to that person, because there are lots of children and young people who are exploited or at risk of exploitation within the community, but it may not be linked to organised exploitation. So, you know, unfortunately, we're all at risk, children, young people, of being having somebody in your life that is a bad influence or who is make crime, for example, and that may trigger a Section 42 safeguarding inquiry, but EMRAC in particular is looking about that exploitation, that being pulled into organised groups. So some examples of what the sort of people that it may be useful to talk about EMRAC as they move. It might be a young person reaching 18 who's already on EMRAC. And the remaining on the agenda can allow ongoing coordination of support. There may be somebody that's already working with adult social care between 18 and 25, and there's concerns about exploitation. Or it could be somebody that's referred into the Adult Safeguarding Hub. There's concerns about exploitation, and there's reason to think, okay, this is a concern where there may be care and support needs that are not visible. There may be care and support needs that are coming from the non-traditional route, or it may be an adult safeguarding intervention is what's needed to put in place support to prevent somebody having care and support needs in the future. As I always like to do with all of these things, I have provided further reading and resources for anybody that wants to do any homework. So I'll leave those on briefly so they're in the video, but I know that Lynn will be putting the slides on with the videos so that people can see those links. But yeah, it's quite a lot of homework there and things to look at. This is from Northumberland. Some interesting reading after that. But that brings us to the important bit, I think, which is the discussion or thoughts. So over to you.
Thanks, Becca. I don't think we've had any questions in the chat or the Q&A function. Just to say, more than happy to stop the recording now, so the questions aren't recorded. So if people want to raise their hands and come online, that would be great. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that'd be brilliant. Then stop the recording, then people can have their cameras and mics on, and we can have.
On. If I can stop the recording, there we go. I can stop recording. There we go. So yeah, I have stopped recording.